Hey, good morning. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and today we're going to talk about the Capitol Police riots and how, come to find out, it doesn't seem like it was Trump's fault after all. Because now, as we look deeper behind the curtain, we see that there was a failure in security, in planning, in training, and in law enforcement in general. How the FBI told the Capitol Police a day before that there were going to be violent riots, right? People are planning to violently riot and storm the Capitol, right? Plans were online. Everything that they wanted to do was there. And now, who's to blame? Bad communication, the FBI, the Pentagon, like everyone else is being blamed. But the one person that wasn't blamed yesterday was Trump. Crazy, right? So, they impeached him. And I think they forgot to say, well, even though we believed he motivated the riots, but the issue of why the riots actually happened and were successful for those who did it were not because of what Trump said or anything Trump did. It was because of a failure to plan. So let's read this New York Times piece about what happened yesterday. So here we are. 3 former Capitol security officials deflected responsibility at a Senate hearing on Tuesday for security failures that contributed to the January 6th riot, blaming other agencies, each other, and at one point, even a subordinate for the breakdowns that allowed hundreds of Trump supporters to storm the Capitol. Now, mind you, if you're looking at law enforcement failures, this is what happens, right? The person that's, blank rolls downhill. So you don't blame like, oh, we forgot to plan for this or we forgot to train. It was this person's fault. It was that person's fault. Oh, it was even my subordinate's fault, right? The person who I'm supervising didn't do the right thing. So everybody was being blamed instead of just acknowledging that we messed up. We didn't plan this right. And that's why these people got killed. That's why it was all a failure of planning. And I'm going to say that time and time again. If you don't like that, it's just the truth. It's the absolute truth is that no matter what Trump said that day, those people are going to go there and we're going to protest. That protest turned into a riot because police were unprepared. That's just a simple fact. Their testimony illustrated the chaos of the day, suggesting that officials were reluctant to accept responsibility for the politically charged issue of calling in the National Guard, even as the violence escalated. It also showed that the overlapping jurisdictions of the Capitol Police, the District of Columbia government, and other agencies created utter confusion that hindered attempts to stop the most violent assault on the Capitol since the War of 1812. So, again, it's planning. This is all planning. The officials testified that the FBI and intelligence community had failed to provide adequate warnings that the rioters planned to seize the Capitol, and that the Pentagon was too slow after the attack began to authorize guard troops to help overwhelm the police. They also gave their own conflicting accounts of communicating with each other as they sought to quell the riots in the early minutes. Now, just to be clear, the FBI has come forward and said, no, we told you.
Accused U.S. intelligence agencies of underestimating the extremist group threat. The FBI did send a raw intelligence report the night before the riot warning of an attack on the Capitol, but Sund insists it never got to him, and the D.C. police chief says it was just an email.
I would certainly think that something as violent as an insurrection in the Capitol would warrant a phone call or something.
Right, the day before, here's the bulletin we sent to the Capitol Police saying these people were coming, they were coming for quote unquote war, and you guys should be prepared, right? The people at the top, right? The head of the Capitol Police was like, we didn't hear any of that, right? And it was a subordinate. Nobody ever told me, right? If the FBI says people are coming to storm the Capitol, to raid the place, right? They're coming for war, and you don't plan for it, how is that not your fault? How is that not a failure in leadership, right? Now, all this finger pointing is what you would expect. Is what you would expect from people who just messed up. They were asleep at the wheel. Remember, if you watch my other videos, we had news reports, we had intelligence. Remember that the newspapers were laughing at, they called it what did they call it? The Trump supporters' fantasies of storming the Capitol, right? They called it fantasies almost. And now they say, oh, well, we didn't know anything about it, even though the FBI told us. Again, I hate to say this, but when you look at the Black Lives Matter rally, and when they had everybody in riot gear before the one protester even stepped foot onto the street, let's just be clear. We all know that the Capitol Police can prepare for rioters. They've done it in the past. They do it all the time.
On June 1st.
It has been an entirely peaceful protest.
It was met by forces with helmets, riot shields, rifles, and tear gas. The authorities here were a mix of police and military. There were Secret Service, Park Police, the National Guard, prison special operations, and local police from a nearby county. But can you tell which ones are the police? If it's hard to tell, it's these guys, by the way. It's because America's police have been looking more and more like troops.
Get in the hill!
So why do American police officers look like soldiers? And where did they get all these weapons?
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! This was a peaceful protest!
They did it for the Black Lives Matter rallies, right? They did it. It's not like they don't do this. So now they're saying, why didn't you do what you did here for these people? Why didn't you do it for these people? Well, we expected them to be peaceful, even though the FBI told us that they wouldn't. I don't know. Do you buy this? Quote, none of the intelligence we received predicted what actually occurred, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen A. Sudd told senators. He called the riot the worst attack on law enforcement and our democracy that I've ever seen. And he said he witnessed insurrectionists assaulting officers, not only with their fists, but with pipes, sticks, bats, barricades, and flagpoles. These criminals were prepared for war. You knew not only did you know they were coming, you know why they were coming. You know they were coming to storm the Capitol, right? News reports said they're coming to storm the Capitol. And now he's saying, well, this was the worst attack in the history, and we didn't know, right? There was nothing that the alert was not going to say they're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? They're not the full plans are not going to be dictated to you like that, right? They're going to say, well, you have a whole bunch of people who are coming to do X, to storm the Capitol. Would you have 5 officers at a barricade?
At 12:53, a large crowd approached approximately 5 Capitol Police officers standing at a fenced-off entrance near the Peace Monument. According to ABC News sources that day, many Capitol Police were armed only with mace and their sidearms. As the crowd pushed the barricades over, the police were quickly overwhelmed. In contrast to other events in D.C. last summer, additional state and federal law enforcement was not pre-staged ahead of the riot.
When you know you have thousands of people coming to storm the Capitol, this makes no sense. This guy is trying to save whatever career that he has left. But I wouldn't be hiring the head of my security department at no time, right? This guy's incompetent. He and 2 other officials, the former Sergeant of Arms Paul D. Irving and his Senate counterpart Michael C. Stenger, the 2 top security officials at the Capitol on the day of the assault, did acknowledge their own mistakes, as well as Mr. Sudd admitted that his staff had never trained for such a wide-scale intrusion and lacked proper protective equipment. That's an admission right there. They weren't trained. They didn't have any equipment. How are you blaming Donald Trump for this? Like, how do you blame Donald Trump for this? Listen, I don't care if you're left or right, but let's just Donald Trump gave his speech, and I'm granting there's no evidence the election was stolen. That's all junk, right? That's all BS. The election was not stolen. He lost. But, he lost by millions of votes. He lost. But He goes out, gives a speech. We're going to peacefully protest. I want you to scream and yell outside to let those people inside the building know that we believe the election was stolen. They walk down. You have some people in there who want to go storm the Capitol, right? Just like at a Black Lives Matter rally. You have some people in there who want to loot. And you have the rest of the people who are there peacefully marching. So the looters go loot. They're the criminals. But the people who are out there peacefully protesting, they're peacefully protesting. So you got people marching down, peacefully protesting, want their, exercise their constitutional rights. And they go, and then it turns it, and then when they get there, when they get to the Capitol, the police weren't trained by this admission. They didn't have the proper equipment, and they didn't have enough police there to protect the building. How was that Trump's fault? Now, let's imagine in a world where they were well prepared, right? Like this Black Lives Matter. Let's say they were well prepared. Does Trump get impeached? If the Capitol Police were well prepared for the riot, do you think Donald Trump gets impeached the second time? No, absolutely not. He does not get impeached, right? So it makes you think, was his impeachment based on the failure of the law enforcement officials to do their job? Coming a month and a half after the siege, the testimony was the first high-profile public hearing in what's expected to be a lengthy series of investigations into the attack. It provided the most detailed account of the security mistakes leading up to and during the nearly 5-hour siege. Senators deemed the lapse of failure of imagination. I say imagination, to consider hundreds of rioters would be willing to storm the Capitol, a refrain frequently invoked by officials nearly 2 decades ago to explain the security breakdowns that led to the September 11th, 2001 attacks, right? Hey, we didn't know that, in 2011, it was like, we didn't know that terrorists were, well, no, they did. We knew that terrorists were flying planes and didn't care about landing them, right? We knew that but nobody talked to each other, right? The FBI wasn't talking to the CIA, and so that's why we got the Department of Homeland Security. So everybody talks to the Department of Homeland Security, and they work it out. But that's what happened. That's what they're saying happened here. The FBI wasn't talking to the Capitol Police. Capitol Police wasn't talking to the Pentagon. The Pentagon wasn't talking. Nobody, everybody was just lost. Do you really think that's the case? I think this is all BS. There's no way. Especially the fact that they've done this before, right? There have been so many times where they've done this. They've had adequate policing at rallies, at protests. We've seen it. And now all of a sudden, nobody knows what to do. They're not even trained for this? Like really? Like, who's believing this? Former President Donald J. Trump was rarely mentioned during this nearly 4-hour hearing, despite his perpetuation of the baseless claims of widespread election fraud and his encouragement of his supporters to march on the Capitol on June 6th to pressure lawmakers to stop the certification of the presidential election. Now, this, I think, I'm just going to say it. This is the media bias that everybody's talking about, right? This was, yes. Why would you mention President Trump, former President Trump, when he had nothing to do with these security things, right? This wasn't President Trump saying, have enough officers, right? He assumed that the person there would know, oh, well, you know what? We got tens of thousands of people coming. The FBI is giving out bulletins that they're coming for war. We have all this online chatter. The newspapers are making fun of it, saying they're coming to storm the Capitol. And this local newspaper, the Washington, they actually made fun of the plot. MAGA geniuses plot to take over the U.S. Capitol. In this article, they talk about how on all these pro-Trump websites and blogs that protesters have discussed ways they may occupy and storm the U.S. Capitol and make citizens arrest of lawmakers who hold old-fashioned views like honoring state-certified elections. Again, they're mocking these insurrectionists who are planning to storm the building. They're mocking their plans. They even told the Capitol Police, hey, look, we found these plans. We found these maps, right? This is what they're talking about. They're talking about storming your building. And the Capitol Police spokesperson declined to comment on MAGA fans' what they called thought experiments. Quote, while we do not discuss the means, methods, and specific resources used to carry out our protective responsibility, the U.S. Capitol Police has a comprehensive security plan in place and will continuously monitor and access new and emerging threats with the overall goal of keeping those within the Capitol complex safe and secure. Maybe we should have more than 5 officers at the barricade tomorrow, right? We got about, 20,000 people coming? Let's put more than 5 officers there. No. 5 officers are enough. This article kind of throwing Trump's name in this, I think is irrelevant, right? Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to say this, if there was adequate security at this event, Trump would not have gotten impeached. That's my question to you. Do you think if there was adequate security at this event, do you think Trump would have gotten impeached for the second time? I don't think so. Why would you impeach him? Nothing would have happened. Senate aides said lawmakers coming off the impeachment this month wanted to focus more narrowly on security issues. That's because you couldn't blame Trump. That's the reason why. You couldn't blame Trump. Neither the FBI nor Pentagon officials appeared at the hearing on Tuesday, but they're expected to testify next week as the Homeland Security and Rules panels continue their joint investigation. I'm going to say it. I think this whole thing was a failure in both planning, execution, training of the Capitol Police. I believe the management of the Capitol Police and the Capitol Security just totally failed. It was a total failure on all means. I base that opinion on the fact that when they've had other protests, they were well staffed. When Trump wanted to walk across the street to go to the church, they were using flashbangs and stuff like that. It's not like this was the first time these people had dealt with a protest, right? But now they got caught with their pants down. Why did they train so hard for something like a Black Lives Matter rally? Why were they so prepared for a Black Lives Matter rally? And then when this rally comes and they have the warnings from the FBI that says they are coming to storm the Capitol for an attack, they do nothing. If the Capitol Police and the security officials had properly trained, had properly heeded the warnings, and had properly staffed the event, there would have been no riot, there would have been no insurrection. And at the end of the day, I don't think Trump would have been impeached for the second time. But it's not about what I think, it's about what you think. Leave your comments below, let me know how you feel. My name is Nate, lawyer, YouTuber, and I'm out.